our stream on YouTube is starting. Do you have any question? If you want to interact with me, of course, you have two possibilities. One, you raise your hand. Now, you raise your hands, and I try to notice if you raise your hands, or you unmute your microphone and you say, "Oh, professor, I need to talk with you." Okay. Let's see if I can go back. Perfect. I hope you can see the screen now.
Yes, Professor.
Thank you very much. Let's go little by little into the subject of environmental impact assessment. I am a teacher in charge. We will have during this class some case studies that will be illustrated by outside experts that will come in the class and try to show you how environmental impact assessment, or LCA, an LCA procedure can be carried in real cases. My assistant is Alberto Barause, that will be in charge of some of lectures, in particular the lectures for risk assessment and incidence evaluation assessment. So we start as customary with the definition of environment, and we start with the classic definition of the European Council, 1973. Environment is the set of elements that in the complexity of their relationships constitute the framework, the habitat, and the condition of human life, which are in reality or what are perceived. First of all, you should note that we have employed the term complexity here. Let me see if I can draw. Oh, yes. We have employed the term complexity. I'm trying to find the right pencil. Wait. Because it is universally recognized that environmental systems are complex systems. This complexity is manifested by a set of interrelationships between the various elements that constitute the environmental system. These interrelationships constitute the framework, or we may say in ecological terms, the habitat, or the condition for human life. So we have a very anthropogenic perspective here in which we see the environment as a set of elements that are necessary to ensure the perceiving or the persistence of human life. In this sense, is the very anthropogenic perspective. This class, sorry, I tried to cancel it. I'm sorry, but I have to become a little bit more comfortable myself. Okay. This class, besides discussing a set of models or tools, so the scope is that of teaching the students to carry independently an environmental impact assessment procedure, refers, in this class, we refer to a very large set of policy texts or norms. In particular, we focus on the European Community policy and on the Italian policy. Of course, all the countries, students that are Erasmus students that come from countries that are in the European Community may find useful what the discussion that we are going to do concerning policy. So let's start with a short overview of environmental policy. The first important step into environmental policy is the so-called Club of Rome. Some of you may have already heard about this. It refers to 1968, and it was focusing on reflection on the development model. So the development model in the late 60s was put into discussion, was criticized by reasoning, but by recognizing that there are some limits to growth. So this is quite strange, because if you talk with economists or if you talk with politicians in general, they all talk about growth, growth, growth. In the late 60s, it was recognized that growth, unlimited growth, is a nonsense. So it started a discussion on the limit of growth, and the issue was that of exhaustion of the resources and the discrepancy between the objectives of economic growth and long-term environmental protection. So it became clear that economic growth itself was contrasting the concept of long-term environmental protection. In 1972, with the Stockholm Conference, it was recognized that man is the bearer of a solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environment for present and future generations. And then we had to wait until 1983 for the establishment of the UN World Commission on Environment and Development. The works of this commission ended up in 1985-1987 with the well-known Brundtland Report, Our Common Future, in which was first stated out clearly the concept of sustainable development. So nowadays, everybody talks about sustainable development, but I think it is important to look at the history of this concept and how this concept was first introduced into, let's say, the discussions, introduced into the discussion concerning development. So the two key concepts is the limit to growth, recognized early in 1968 from the Club of Rome, and then the concept of sustainable development. Okay. Then we have a set of resolutions, in particular in 1989, UN resolution number 44/228 acknowledges the complexity of the problem. You see, the word complexity comes again. You remember the environment as a definition of a set of elements that in the complexity of their interrelationships constitute the habitat for human beings. Then in 1989, the UN resolution 44/228 calls for the World Conference on Environment and Development, acknowledging the concept of complexity of the problem. Then we have in 1992 the conference in Rio de Janeiro, the so-called Agenda 21 conference, which was established a series of very important international conventions, like the Biodiversity Convention, the Convention on Climate Change, the Ozone Convention, Forest Protection, and so on. 1997 Kyoto Protocol, that deal essentially with climate change and started implementing the commitment of Agenda 21. Then we have in 2002 World Summit in Johannesburg, that was focused on the concept of sustainable development. 2009, we had the climate conference in Copenhagen, in which it was recognized the importance to act against climate change. Then we had the 2016 conference in Paris concerning, again, environmental protection and the tools. So you see that more or less every 5-6 years, we had set a series of different conferences or gathering of all the states, third world states, for third world countries, that was involved into environmental protection issues. And during these gatherings, during these conferences, were established some guidelines in order to draft or to write down some kind of implementation guidelines of this concept into national legislation. This is why the European community is involved, because the European community or the European Union has the responsibility of committing the member states of the community to implement all these policy directives that arise from these international conferences. What are the purpose of the course? Essentially, we will discuss about compatibility. This word will come out very often. The judgment of environmental compatibility. There is no official definition, but the idea is that of verifying that the current environment can accommodate the new work without too much compromises. So the idea is I'm going to realize to build something that will have an impact on the natural environment, and I need to be sure that what I'm doing, and particularly the way I'm doing it, will be compatible with the environment. The second important concept of water sustainability, as defined by the Brundtland report, Our Common Future, and the very general definition of sustainability is development is sustainable if this development can satisfy the needs of a present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So you see, again, there is a focus on humans, society. Human societies need some kind of implementing of technology works, resource management, resource exploitation, and so on. But the development of this technology and management techniques shall be sustainable. And sustainable means that what I'm doing today should not impede or should not limit the possibility of the future generation to meet their own needs. So the concept is, again, as a double-sided concept. Humans need to satisfy their needs today, present generation, but in satisfying their needs today, they shall do that without compromising the ability of future generation to meet, again, their own needs. So we satisfy our needs today without compromising the possibility of satisfying the needs of future generations. So again, what are the purposes of this class? Understanding and controlling the possible interaction between the works of man and the environment. Environment, I recall, is a complex system, and so we need complex models or complex environmental assessment tools, environmental impact assessment tools, in order to consistently evaluate the effects of works of man on the environment. Second purpose, getting the main procedures for evaluating the quality of environment. So we'll introduce the concept of environmental indicators, and we'll define it, and we'll see how an environmental indicators can be classified, can be defined, classified, and measured. And then we shall learn the most common tools for evaluation and analysis of environmental impact. In particular, we are talking here about models for assessment and decision-making. So the purpose of the course will introduce also a set of models. So we will discuss mainly environmental impact assessment, and as we will see, environmental impact assessment is a very well-defined procedure that need to be carried according to a very specified or specific pathway. But we will also discuss about strategic environmental appraisal, environmental incidence appraisal, integrated pollution prevention and control, IPPC, and risk analysis. The idea is to introduce procedures to verify the environmental compatibility and the environmental sustainability of man-made works, following the procedures here stated. So the procedures will look at environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental appraisal, environmental incidence appraisal, integrated pollution prevention and control, and risk analysis. These are all procedures that are strictly normed by a very well-defined body of law and legislation that defines the pathway for implementing these procedures. Typically, the environmental engineer is called as a consultant in order to carry out this kind of procedures. Normally, the national laws require to, before implementing a man-made work that may have some impact on the environment, national legislations require to carry one or several or many of these procedures in order to obtain an authorization of a building of his man-made work. The scope is that of verifying the environmental compatibility and the environmental sustainability of the man-made work. Among the various tools to implement these procedures, we have tools for the quantification of impacts, typically cost-benefit analysis, multi-criteria analysis, life cycle assessment, or various accounting tools, risk analysis, and so on. So we'll briefly touch or introduce all these tools, and some of them will be discussed more in detail. Here you have a calendar of the class. You can download this PDF from the Moodle class, from the Moodle page. Today it is the 1st of October, and we are here, introduction. Next week we'll start to describe the procedure and regulations. In particular, next week we'll discuss about the European regulations. The week after, we will discuss about the Italian regulations. So for environment, for Erasmus students or non-Italian students, they are not required to follow this lecture, but the idea is that if they follow this lecture, they should look into their own country legislation to find the parallels, because this lecture will explain how, in particular, Italy has implemented the European regulation. So I am supposing that students coming from other European countries shall look at their national legislation to see how their own country has implemented into their own legislation the European regulations. So we will have a stop on the 15th of October because I have a commitment that I cannot give you lecture. And we will start next week discussing environmental components and various tools for impact evaluations. Then we will have an entire lecture on Thursday dealing with integrated pollution prevention and control, IPPC. It is a special procedure oriented to industrial plants. Then the week after, so the week of the 26th of October, we'll start discussing tools. So we will introduce decision models, multi-criteria models. Then the next week, the week of the 2nd of November, we will introduce a cost-benefit analysis and other accountancy models. By the end of this week, meaning on the second lecture of this week, on Thursday, November 5th, we will start discussing the work groups works. You will be requested to gather into groups and to write a report on a specific topic. I will propose a list of topics and each group will choose a topic, and you will require to propose to draft a report on the particular topic, and you will require to present to the whole class your development of a particular topic. So you see, I like to involve the students. So what I'm expecting is after, let's say, by the end of October, in beginning of November, I would like to subdivide the classroom in work groups. Each work group selects a topic, and in work groups you write a relationship, a report on the topic, and you produce a presentation that may be a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. And by the end of the course, this means in January, all the students with all the groups will be asked to present to the classroom their work. Then we will start from the beginning of November with some seminars held by external experts. In particular, we will have Alessandro Manzardo, that will present voluntary tools for environmental management. We have 2 lectures. We will have a lecture on ecosystem services, in particular in the Vimine project, that is a project on the protection of the intertidal marine ecosystems in the Lagoon of Venice. And we introduce the very important concept of ecosystem services. Then on the 23rd of November, you will have a risk assessment and an LCA example for a glass factory that will be presented by students. Then the week after, we will not have lectures because I have commitments. And then we will finish with a life cycle assessment, incidence evaluation before Christmas. After Christmas, I am expecting, in particular the week from the 11th of January 2021, that each work group is presenting their work. And we will devote the day of 12th of January and 14th of January for these presentations. Okay, do you have any questions? Okay, the course is essentially structured in 5 modules. We have 1 module that has to do with policy and statements. So we will go it immediately after this introduction. We will start discussing policy about environmental protection, development, and sustainable development. Then we will have another module that has to do with procedures So we introduce environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental appraisal, integrated pollution prevention and control, and so on. And then we will discuss environmental components, what is a key concept in order to build all these procedures. The third module, we will introduce decision and analysis tools with notes on the theory of decision. So we will have a lecture on the theory of decision. It is a theoretical lecture. Then we will have a fourth module that deals essentially with risk analysis. And then a fifth module, what I call here tutorials. In reality, these tutorials refer to the seminars that will be done by the experts, external experts. By external experts, I mean environmental engineers or other professionals that are applying the tools and the methodologies that we are discussing in this class in real cases, so in real life. So you see, this is the temporal development of these modules. We start with introducing a policy. The second one, this is a procedure, starts parallel to a policy, and we go up to the decision and analysis tools. Decision and analysis tools goes up to the end of the class. We will have a short, in the last fourth of the class, a short discussion about risk analysis, while the tutorials will start in the second third of the class, and we go on until the end. So again, what is the course structure? We'll discuss procedures for environmental impact assessment, procedures for strategic environmental appraisal, procedures for incidence appraisal, procedures for IPPC. So I will try to gather several experts that will come and talk on these procedures in practice. What are the tools that we are going to discuss here? Decision tools that are based on the decision theory, so you will need some basics on the decision theory. Then we will see how this theory may be practically implemented into decision-making tools or analysis models. In particular, we will discuss multi-criteria models, cost-benefit analysis, accounting tools like budgets or life cycle accounts, life cycle assessments, or we will discuss some risk analysis. You will have a couple of lectures in the end on risk analysis, in which we'll discuss the procedure and some specific analytical tools, in particular to evaluate health risk, ecological risk, or in order to characterize and represent the risk, and to discuss the concept of risk perception. Why we have to discuss about risk perception? Because often it happens that the risk, as it is perceived, is different from the real risk. Typically, the example that we always give is that of traveling by car or traveling by airplane. Typically, somebody who travels by airplane is much more scared by somebody who's traveling by car. But if you do a statistic analysis, then you discover that the probability of dying due to a car accident is much higher than the probability of dying due to an aircraft accident. So this is to say that often the risks, the real risks, are not perceived as they are. What are the didactic tools for the class? Lessons, some class exercises, the handouts that you may download from the Moodle site, and then some textbooks, and some resources that you may find on the web. The classical reference textbook for the course It's a book written by Raffaello Cosso, and unfortunately it is in Italian. But for the foreign students, non-Italian students, I have provided a set of links to resources in English, but the concepts are so general and so well described on the web in English text, but I'm not going to provide any English text, but instead I'm expecting that you are going to do some Googling on the net in order to look for resources. You will do this job in particular when you will be building your report on the particular topic that you will describe and analyze in the work group. Okay. What about the final assessment? The final assessment is made up of an individual oral exam, but is not compulsory. A short case study report elaborated in work group of 4 to 5 students, a presentation of results of the work group in the class, and then the mark is calculated by the summing the individual grade achieved to the evaluations of the reports and work group presentation. Is it clear? The final mark comes from the report, 1 to 10 points, the oral presentation, 1 to 10 points, and the customary oral examination on all subjects of the course. You understand that point 1 and 2, the report and the oral presentation, if you are good enough, makes already 20 over 30, and so this makes you the exam. And so you shall come to the oral examination only if you want to get a mark that is higher than 20. To my experience, or experience of the past years, normally Erasmus or foreign students are in general happy with point 1 to 2, so the report and the oral presentation, and these are work group made. So the only way to distinguish the students in a work group is to do the oral examination on all the subject of the course. So we will have ordinary sessions in which we will discuss 1 to 10 points. So for the oral examinations, you will get only 1 to 10 points. The reports, as I told you, the group, I expect groups of 3 to 4, 5, sometimes 6 students, depending on the number of attending students. Now in the class, you are 19. So I'm supposing we may have 4 groups of 5 students. The topic, I will propose the topic, and each group may express 2 preferences. To each topic corresponds a scientific reference that will be me or Alberto or one of the external reporters. The report should be maximum 12 pages. Then I'm expecting a presentation, but maybe PowerPoint of maximum 10 minutes plus 5 minutes discussion in class. And as I told you, a final mark, report plus presentation, will be communicated before the oral examination. So in order to have your grade, you shall come to the classical sessions for the oral examination and tell me your name. I will check your report plus presentation grades, and I will tell you, you have 18 points. Do you want to make the oral examination? Yes or no? If you say no, I am happy with that. then I can register immediately the exam like this. Okay, these are a list of proposed topics. Last year, environmental impact assessment procedure for a surface flow constructed wetland system. So you are expected to draft on your report the procedure for carrying an environmental impact assessment focused on a constructed wetland system. Or the second topic, construction of a decision support system using techniques like multi-criteria analysis to answer, for example, to a question where to place a surface flow constructed wetland system in a given river basin. This topic, I published a paper on this in the late 90s, so you may employ this paper as a guidance to understand what we mean by a multi-criteria analysis employed to build a decision support system. Third topic, GIS applied to environmental impact assessment. How can we use these tools? This is a kind of reference report work in which you shall collect a series of information on how to use GIS, how GIS tools may be useful for carrying out environmental impact assessment procedure. Or you may draft a life cycle assessment procedure or life cycle assessment study for any industrial product that you may propose. Environmental impact assessment applied to a proposed plant modification as a consequence of complained olfactory impacts, for example, is another example of topics. Or risk analysis, example of application of the tools of risk analysis for the identification and classification of impacts according to the type of impact itself. I am very open on the proposal of topics, so this means that if you have any topic you would like to develop, let's say after the second month or by the end of the second month of the class, I am ready to accept your proposal in order to write a report on your proposal. Of course, your proposal shall include one of the arguments that we have discussed in the class. Okay, again, this is the info. The web page is found in Moodle of the DCEA department, and this is our mails. Please do not hesitate to contact us by mails. Okay, at this point, I finish here my introduction, and I'm waiting in the class for any question. So if any of you has any questions, should unmute the microphone and pose the question, and I will try to answer. Se avete delle domande, vi ascolto, togliete il mute al microfono e fate le vostre domande, io cercherò di rispondervi. Altrimenti, se non avete altre domande, io fra un quarto d'ora chiudo la classe e ci vediamo per la seconda lezione giovedì prossimo, anzi martedì prossimo. Martedì prossimo la lezione è alle 9:30.